Mr. President, I rise today to speak in support of the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization bill that is before the Senate that we've been debating over the last week, and ensuring that our great nation, states like Colorado, states like Alaska that have important aviation industries, have a healthy and safe general aviation community and comprehensive aviation infrastructure are exactly the type of issues that this Congress needs to be working on, and the type that have been a top priority in previous Congresses. Now, in my state, aviation has a very rich history and is an incredibly important driver of our economy, but also an important element of just connecting the entire state. Many aspects of our lives in Alaska rely on commercial and general aviation. Living in a state of such enormous scale with numerous remote communities gives Alaskans a very deep appreciation for air travel, which in many cases provides the only means for transportation for many residents. You know, Mr. President, one of the things that's very much an honor being in the U.S. Senate is how different senators come and describe life in their states. So all Americans have a better understanding of how the entire country is knitted together, how we work together, but what unique challenges different states have. More than 100 communities in Alaska, including regional centers like Bethel, Nome, Barrow, Kotzebue. Aviation is the only means of getting in and out of those communities, since there are no roads. Imagine that. Most states don't understand that. We have hundreds of communities, no roads, no ferry service, so aviation is critical. Alaska is unique in its dependence on aviation, and indeed, we have very busy, what we call highway of the skies. More pilots per capita in my state than any other state in the country. And so that means everything from mail to groceries to baby diapers have to be flown in by plane to many communities. And if someone gets sick and needs to see a doctor, oftentimes that can only be done by air. There are over 400 general aviation airports across Alaska, 250 of which are owned and operated by the state of Alaska. And that doesn't include over hundreds of heliports that support mining, timber, the oil and gas industry, and others. So general aviation and aviation infrastructure is a critical component of our economy, our quality of life. For our state, for Alaska, it's fundamental in terms of connecting people and communities and promoting and sustaining economic development. Indeed, estimates show that the general aviation community contributes over $1 billion a year in economic activity to the state of Alaska's economy and supports over 47,000 jobs. That's 1 in 10 jobs in the entire state. So this is a very important bill. It's an important bill for the state of Alaska, but it's also an important bill for the United States of America. The FAA bill reauthorization will expire in July, and it is important to avoid the uncertainty of more short-term extensions by passing the authorization bill we have had on the floor here in the Senate over the last week. So I want to thank the very hard work of Chairman Thune, Ranking Member Nelson, for all the work that they have been doing night and day, really for months, on this important bill, this important bipartisan bill. So far, the process has been a model of how the Senate should work. And you know, our friends in the media, they love to write the stories about nothing working in the U.S. Senate. I don't think so. There's a lot of important bills moving. A highway bill, education bill, human trafficking. Now we're looking at a bipartisan way to address a very important bill for the country. That's aviation infrastructure, and that's aviation security. So let me talk about some of the substance more broadly for the country on why this bill is so important. One aspect of the bill is the Pilot's Bill of Rights. The Pilot's Bill of Rights 2. Building off the success of the initial Pilot's Bill of Rights, this provision continues to make essential reforms for pilots, mostly general aviation pilots that are so important in my state, streamlining an overly burdensome medical certification process, increasing transparency and access to additional information for pilots in all the different aspects of their requirements as being pilots in the general aviation community. There's provisions that also balance and make essential inroads towards rebalancing the relationship between the FAA and general aviation pilots. And one thing that this Senate bill does not do, there's been a discussion over in the House, it does not transfer the air traffic control services that are so important to many of our states, particularly rural states, to a private corporation. Mr. President, this bill also, very importantly, strengthens safety for pilots and passengers across the country. You can't pick up the news and see how important this issue is. From the terror attacks in Brussels at the airport there, to the Russian flight out of Egypt that went down because of a suspected ISIS attack, to instances of criminal behavior, even among U.S. airport employees, events around the world have underscored just how important the need for stronger security measures for our nation's air travel is. And what's really important, Mr. President, is this is the Senate taking proactive action. This is not a bill on aviation security where we're reacting to some horrible tragedy, God forbid, in terms of aviation security, whether an accident, whether a terrorist attack at one of our airports. What we've been doing is looking at the challenges in these areas and taking proactive measures so we don't have to react when there's a terrorist attack or an accident. So these are comprehensive airline security reforms that are some of the most important that we've occurred and debated in this body for over a decade. Let me just list a few of them. The bill includes several measures for the security of passengers by improving airport employee vetting to ensure that potentially dangerous individuals don't have access to secure areas in our airports, expanding the enrollment in TSA pre-check programs so passengers move through security lines into more secure areas more quickly. We saw how important that was in Brussels. And enhancing security for international flights bound for the United States. So overall, this legislation addresses a growing concern in terms of security, including the cybersecurity threats facing aviation and air navigation systems for our commercial airlines. The bipartisan FAA reauthorization does more for passengers and more for security than any bill, at least in the last decade. It's an important bill. It's a good bill for America. It's a good bill for Alaska. It'll advance measures to keep us safer. And that's why I'm supporting this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to do so as well. I yield the floor.